You have just seen some of the combat capabilities of the U.S. Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marines. All four service components have individual characteristics that make them distinct. However, when their capabilities are combined into a single unified force, the resultant combat power far exceeds any single component's potential. This presentation describes the employment of air power in support of joint operations and tells how the individual components can function within a single joint system for planning, coordinating, and integrating air power with land and sea operations. It explains the major elements of the Air Force Theater Air Control System, the Army Air Ground System, the Marine Air Command and Control System, and the Navy Tactical Air Control System. Although each of these systems can operate independently, you will see how a totally integrated campaign using Army, Air Force, Navy, and Marine assets is more effective in supporting joint force objectives. You will see how each of these four command and control systems are organized within a U.S. joint force structure, and how the principle of centralized control facilitates greater combat efficiency and faster response. Most importantly, you will learn how these systems are tied together through a network of liaison elements and communication systems for interoperability. Finally, you will see a joint air support system in operation as you view the process by which pre-planned and immediate requests for air support are initiated, coordinated, and executed. To begin, let's review a principle for employing air power. Air power is best employed using the principle of centralized control. This principle was adopted based on lessons learned during World War II. Initially, air resources were dedicated to specific ground units and only supported those units. There was no central authority or organization that could mass air power to support a key battle or point of decision. The Germans, on the other hand, used a centralized control system that gave them the flexibility to mass forces and concentrate air and ground attacks. With this arrangement, our forces were outmatched. To overcome our disadvantage, U.S. forces were reorganized to centralize the control of air power. A single air commander was designated to direct the theater air war. Today, doctrine for the employment of air power is still based on the principle of centralized control through a single air commander. To show how we apply this doctrine, let's assume the National Command Authority directed through the Secretary of Defense the formation of a joint task force. A commander is appointed, given a mission and operational control of the forces necessary to accomplish the mission. The Joint Task Force is composed of Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, and Navy components, plus Special Operation Forces. The Air Force component consists of an Air Force headquarters with assigned forces including fighter, bomber, recce, airlift, rescue, and tanker units. The Army component is a field army, composed of 2 corps, each with 3 divisions, and air defense, aviation, military intelligence, signal, and field artillery brigades. The Marine component is a Marine Air-Ground Task Force, consisting of a command element, ground combat element, aviation combat element, and combat service support element. The Navy component consists of a Navy task force, composed of 2 task groups with 2 aircraft carriers and a contingent of cruisers, guided missile destroyers, frigates, and support vessels. The Joint Force Commander determines objectives, establishes priorities, and allocates resources. He uses a joint staff for assistance and advice. Directly under the Operations Division of the Joint Staff is the Joint Operations Center, or JOC. The JOC develops and monitors the execution of the Joint Force Commander's plans. It includes operations and intelligence personnel and is supported by data processing and communication systems equipment. To assist the commander, several joint boards are established. One of them, the Joint Transportation Board, establishes priorities for movement of materials and personnel. A Joint Targeting Steering Group and a Joint Targeting Coordination Board also operate at the Joint Force Headquarters. To achieve unity and economy of effort, and to be able to concentrate sufficient air power at the appropriate time and place, the Joint Force Commander normally designates a Joint Force Air Component Commander, or JFAC, in accordance with guidance listed in joint publications. The JFAC's responsibilities include planning, coordinating, allocating, and tasking air resources based on the Joint Force Commander's apportionment decision. Normally, the JFAC is the Service Component Commander who has the preponderance of air assets to be used and the command, control, and communications ability to assume that responsibility. The Joint Force Commander also designates an Area Air Defense Commander, or AADC. His responsibilities include establishing and operating the Joint Air Defense System and planning, coordinating, and directing air defense operations in accordance with the joint pubs. To establish and operate an airspace control system, the Joint Force Commander designates an Airspace Control Authority, or ACA. The ACA is responsible for planning, coordinating, and integrating airspace control matters. For the Joint Task Force used in our example, the Air Force Component Commander has been appointed by the Joint Force Commander as the Joint Force Air Component Commander, Area Air Defense Commander, and Airspace Control Authority. With this organizational structure and command arrangement in mind, let's examine these air missions and see how centralized control is accomplished from the joint force to the component level. Counter-air missions are flown to gain control of the air. Counter-air consists of two elements: defensive counter-air and offensive counter-air. Defensive counter-air, DCA, or in naval terminology, anti-air warfare, is conducted to detect, identify, intercept, and destroy enemy aerospace forces attempting to attack friendly forces or to penetrate friendly airspace. These operations defend our lines of communication and air bases and support land and naval forces, thus denying an enemy the freedom to carry out offensive air operations. Offensive counter-air, or OCA, are operations that seek out and neutralize or destroy enemy air forces at a time and place of our choosing. These operations are essential. They are designed to gain air superiority and to create an environment which allows us to fly other air missions. Air interdiction. The objectives of interdiction missions are to delay, disrupt, divert, or destroy an enemy's military potential before it can be brought to bear effectively against friendly forces. These operations are performed at such distances from friendly surface forces that detailed integration of specific actions with the fire and movement of friendly forces is normally not required. Close air support. CAS mission objectives are to support surface operations by attacking hostile targets which are in close proximity to friendly forces and which require detailed integration of each air mission with the fire and movement of those forces. For tactical operations, each of these air missions is essential. However, from day to day, the requirements for one type of mission may be greater than for others. Because of this, apportionment is accomplished by the Joint Force Commander, usually on a daily basis. It specifies the level of air effort to be devoted to each of the three primary air missions: CAS, air interdiction, and counter-air. Apportionment is normally expressed in terms of priority, but also may be expressed as a percentage or as the level of air effort to be devoted to a specific geographic region for a specific time. If, for example, a heavy enemy air attack is anticipated tomorrow, the apportionment decision would most likely call for counter-air, which includes DCA and OCA, to be the first priority. The apportionment process is initiated by sending components an apportionment guidance message. This message discusses the general situation, gives an assessment of both enemy and friendly situations, specifies objectives for each component, establishes priorities, and lists any changes to the rules of engagement. Apportionment guidance starts the air tasking cycle prescribed by Joint Pub 3-56.24. Based upon the apportionment guidance message, schemes of maneuver and supporting fire plans, ground forces compile their requests for air support and forward them on air support request messages. At the same time, air-capable components determine fighter, attack, and support aircraft requirements based on the apportionment guidance message and the Joint Force Target List. Once requirements are consolidated, air-capable components complete allocation planning. Allocation is the process of translating the apportionment guidance into numbers of sorties by aircraft type for each air mission. The results of allocation planning are sent to the JFAC by all air-capable components via an allocation request message, or ALLOREC. The first part of the ALLOREC lists each type aircraft available and the total number of sorties available for each aircraft type. The Theater War and Mobility Plan establishes the sortie rate for each aircraft type. To determine sorties available, the number of aircraft possessed is simply multiplied by the established combat sortie rate for each aircraft type. On each component's ALLOREC, sorties available for each aircraft type are subdivided to comply with the apportionment guidance and then listed under one or more air mission columns. This is the respective component's recommended air employment plan. In compliance with Joint Pub 0-2 and the Omnibus Agreement, components will normally make sorties for air defense, long-range interdiction, and long-range reconnaissance missions available to the Joint Force Commander for tasking through his JFAC. This procedure prevents duplication of effort. Sorties in excess of a component's requirements are listed in the ALLOREC and provided to the Joint Force Commander for support of another component or of the Joint Force as a whole. When ALLORECs are received by the JFAC, air employment plans are reviewed. Excess sorties are matched to shortfalls. The result is a plan that best employs all available aircraft to meet the apportionment guidance. On the Joint Force Commander's behalf, the JFAC then sends a sortie allotment message, or sortie allot, to components. The sortie allot reflects the Joint Force Commander's approval of allocation plans from subordinates. It also reflects approval or disapproval of requests submitted as shortfalls on Alarex. Excess sorties are tasked against the approved requests. For each approved request, the sortie allot specifies the complying command and specific data for tasking. In compliance with the sortie allotment message, each air-capable component either develops and disseminates an intra-service air tasking order, or in some cases, a central air operations center produces, with inputs from other components, a single ATO for the entire Joint Task Force. An ATO tasks units to send aircraft to targets or target areas at specific times with prescribed ordnance loads. If there is cross-force tasking, the task component also sends either its ATO or a request confirmation message to requesters to let them know the status of their requests. For approved requests, this message lets requesters know how and what command will provide their requested air support. Once this process has been completed, the ATO is implemented at the established effective time. Once published, adjustments are made to the air tasking order by the issuing command based upon changes to the tactical situation. To ensure this process is accomplished in concert, Joint Pub 3-56.24 prescribes an air tasking cycle, and the Joint Force Commander specifies times for each major information exchange within the cycle. To accomplish this, the first step is to establish the time that ATOs will be effective. For example, for a 24-hour ATO day, the times might be from 0600 hours each day to 0559 hours the next day within the air tasking cycle. Times for major information exchanges are specified in relation to the beginning of an ATO day. In our example, 30 hours prior to the beginning of the ATO day, or at 2400 hours, apportionment guidance is sent to the components. Based on that guidance, air support requests are prepared and sent to supporting components to arrive no later than 25 hours prior to the beginning of the ATO day, or at 0500 hours. Meanwhile, air-capable components perform allocation planning and send allocation request messages to the JFAC. The JFAC represents the Joint Force Commander and performs the joint allotment of excess sorties and/or cross-force tasking. 19 hours prior to the beginning of the ATO day, or by 1100 hours, the results are sent to components via the sortie allotment message. Finally, components complete their ATOs or inputs to a single ATO, and the ATO is disseminated along with the request confirmation messages 12 hours prior to the beginning of the ATO day, or at 1800 hours. Each ATO is sent well in advance to task units so that operations and support personnel have enough time for detailed mission planning, preparing the aircraft, and loading ordnance. Takeoff times are planned by units so that aircraft can make the specified time over target, or TOT. The TOTs in our example are between 0600 hours and 0559 hours the next day. Keep this cycle in mind as we look at each service's command and control structure and see how it functions during the air tasking cycle. The Air Force's Theater Air Control System, or TACS, consists of the organization, personnel, and equipment necessary to plan, direct, and control air operations and to coordinate these operations with other components. The Air Force Component Commander exercises centralized control over the full range of Air Force activities. Like the Joint Force Commander, He has a staff to assist and advise him and to ensure his policies are implemented. The Deputy for Operations, or A3, is the key member of the commander's staff who organizes, manages, and supervises the Air Operations Center, or AOC. The AOC is the operations center for the Air Force component. It is made up of two major divisions: Combat Plans and Combat Operations. They are supported by a Combat Intelligence Division and an Enemy Situation Correlation Division. The AOC's size, number of people, and sophistication depends upon the size of the forces employed. At Combat Plans, personnel begin developing the ATO when they receive an air directive from the Air Force Component Commander. This directive is based on the apportionment guidance. Working with the Combat Intelligence Division, Combat Plans matches available sorties to requirements. After mission information is collated, the ATO is sent to users in U.S. message text format. In simple terms, the Combat Plans Division plans tomorrow's air war. Because of the Air Force Component Commander's responsibilities as Area Air Defense Commander and Airspace Control Authority, the Joint Area Air Defense Center and the Joint Airspace Control Center are located within the AOC. Personnel at these two centers develop and coordinate air defense and airspace control plans. These centers develop and disseminate the Airspace Control Order, the document which specifies airspace control procedures and restrictions. They also develop and distribute the tactical operational data and operational tasking data link messages. These two messages assign radar units areas of responsibility and provide instructions which allow each component's radar system to receive data from the other components, thus enabling them to display the entire theater air picture. The Combat Ops Division oversees today's air war by monitoring and coordinating the execution of the ATO. The Enemy Situation Correlation Division, or NSED, and personnel at the Combat Operations Division evaluate changes in the tactical situation, recommend targeting updates, and make adjustments to tasking as necessary. For example, if reconnaissance reports a critical target, the NSED might make recommendations that result in an air mission being diverted from its pre-planned target to attack this higher priority target. Linked to the AOC are Wing Operation Centers, or WOCs. WOC personnel schedule assigned aircraft, perform detailed mission planning based on the ATO, respond to changes in tasking directed by Combat Ops, and update the AOC on the combat status of their base and equipment. The ground tax radar units have the capability to display air tracks on scopes in near real time. As a result, responsibilities for the Air Force Component Commander's assigned air defense region and airspace control sector are normally decentralized down to the senior ground radar element, the Control and Reporting Center, or CRC. The CRC uses its radar to detect, identify, and verify radar targets, and to monitor friendly aircraft flying in their area of responsibility. Once a track has been identified as hostile, the CRC decides whether to engage it with air defense fighters or surface-to-air missiles. To extend radar surveillance and provide overlapping coverage, additional radar units called Control and Reporting Posts, or CRPs, may also be employed. To extend radar coverage, even more ground mobile radar units called Control and Reporting Elements may be employed even closer to enemy lines. Because these ground-based radars are limited by site placement and terrain obstruction, the Air Force Component Commander employs airborne radar platforms to enhance the overall radar picture. The Airborne Warning and Control System, or AWACS, greatly extends radar coverage with its long-range look-down radar capability. The ground tax radars and AWACS transmit their track data through a Message Processing Center, or MPC, to other components' radar systems in order to provide an integrated theater air picture. Another airborne element of the theater air control system is the Airborne Battlefield Command and Control Center, or ABCCC. On board the EC-130 aircraft is a communications module housing a battle staff which can perform limited functions of an AOC, or can perform as an Air Support Operations Center during small-scale operations. The Tactical Air Coordinator Airborne, or TAC-A, function is to pass information from forward air controllers, or FACs, to pilots flying en route to close air support targets. As the aircraft approach the target area, the TAC-A passes control of the aircraft to the FAC for final control. If communications problems exist, the TAC-A acts as a radio relay, passing final attack clearance from the FAC. If required and depending upon the threat, the TAC-A can perform the role of forward air controller. Tanker and airlift operations are controlled by the Airlift Division with tanker augmentation and a strategic support cell. The Airlift Division maintains centralized control over assigned theater tanker and airlift forces. Airlift plans integrate tankers into the ATO. They also prepare the airlift mission schedule based on priorities established by the Joint Transportation Board. Airlift ops monitor the execution of tanker and airlift missions. They make adjustments based on requirements and revised priorities. Subordinate to the Airlift Division are tanker airlift control elements, located at main onloading, offloading, and staging airfields. TALCs coordinate arriving and departing airlift, tankers, and aeromedical evacuation aircraft, and supervise cargo loading and offloading activities at their locations. Combat Control Teams, or CCTs, work in forward areas, controlling airlift aircraft. Their jump-qualified personnel can be airdropped into an area, and once on the ground can emplace navigation aids, locate, identify, and mark drop zones, landing zones, or extraction zones, and provide limited air traffic control services. That concludes our discussion of the Air Force Theater Air Control System. Let's now look at the Army organization and personnel who make up the Army Air-Ground System, or AGS. Collectively, the AGS includes operations, air defense, aviation, intelligence, logistical, and fire support personnel working at several levels of command. They are not assigned to a central headquarters or located at any one facility. To see how the Army Air-Ground System is superimposed over the existing Army structure, let's extend the echelon of command from the Field Army down to the maneuver battalions. The Field Army Commander exercises operational control over the full range of Army activities. Keep in mind that this Field Army has 2 corps. Each corps has 3 divisions. The divisions have 3 brigades each, and each brigade has 3 maneuver battalions. From corps to battalion, each level has its own command post that plans and conducts operations based on their assigned missions. Requests for close air support and air interdiction missions are processed and evaluated by the G or S3 Air at each command post. These staff officers are members of their respective fire support elements, which include an Air Force Air Liaison Officer who advises other members on air support matters, and a Field Artillery Officer who is responsible for ensuring that close air support and air interdiction missions are coordinated as necessary with other fire support means. Requests for air reconnaissance missions are evaluated and processed by the S2 at battalion and brigade, and by the Tactical Surveillance Officer at division and corps. Together, they ensure organic and attached surveillance means and supporting air reconnaissance assets are coordinated with the overall intelligence collection plan and are used effectively. Requests for operational airlift are processed and evaluated by the respective S or G3 staff officers, while requests for logistical airlift are processed and evaluated by the respective S or G4 staff. When a logistical airlift request reaches the Army level, the G4 validates the request, determines if the supplies are available, and if they can be moved using Army resources. Should the request exceed the Army's movement capability, it is sent to the Joint Transportation Board for validation and action. If the Joint Transportation Board determines that airlift is required, it assigns a priority to the request and forwards it to the Airlift Division for execution. An Army Airspace Command and Control, or A2C2 element, is located at each corps and division command post. The respective G3 has staff responsibility for these elements, which include Army aviation and air defense personnel who perform formal coordination for Army airspace users. Below division level, there is no formal A2C2 element. Airspace functions at these levels are performed by the respective commander and staff. However, they may be assisted by representatives from supporting aviation and air defense personnel. Regardless of the organization, airspace management and air defense functions are performed at all Army levels. That covers the basic Army air-ground system. Let's continue with the Marine Air Command and Control System by looking at the assigned Marine Air-Ground Task Force. In this example, a Marine Expeditionary Force, or MEF, is established ashore. The commander exercises operational control over the full range of MAGTF's activities from a combat operations center. Like the previously mentioned commanders, he also has a staff for advice and assistance. Marine aircraft support is closely integrated with Marine ground force operations. To provide this integration and to operate with other service components, the MAGTF uses the MAX. The MAX consists of the organization, personnel, and equipment necessary to plan, direct, and control Marine aircraft and missiles. In this example, the Aviation Combat Element, or ACE, commander is designated the Tactical Air Commander, or TAC, and is in charge of MAGTF air operations. He exercises this authority through the MAX. He operates from a facility designated as the Tactical Air Command Center. The organization of the TACC is similar to the Air Force AOC. The Future Operations Section develops and disseminates the MAGTF ATO, and the Current Operations Section monitors its execution and makes adjustments as dictated by the tactical situation. Marine fixed-wing and helicopter squadrons perform detailed mission planning based on the ATO and respond to changes directed by the TACC Current Operations Section. For radar surveillance and control, the MAX can field 2 Tactical Air Operation Centers, or TAOCs. Each TAOC has 2 types of radars with which they perform air defense and airspace control functions similar to those of the Air Force CRC. TAOCs transmit track data to the TACC and to other components through a Tactical Data Communications Center, which performs the same function as the Air Force Message Processing Center. Airborne elements of the MAX include a KC-130 aircraft with a module and a crew similar to the Air Force's ABCCC. This element functions as an extension of the DASC, which is similar to an Air Force ASOC. The MAX has Tactical Air Coordinators Airborne, or TAC-As. TAC-As are extensions of the DASC and Forward Air Controllers Airborne, or FAC-As. FAC-As are extensions of TACPs. These airborne elements coordinate and control direct air support aircraft, adjust artillery and naval gunfire, and provide visual reconnaissance. In this example, the ground combat element is a Marine division. This division is organized similarly to an Army division, except that it has regiments instead of brigades. The division, regiments, and battalions have assigned TACPs, which act as air advisors to the maneuver units, assist in the submission of pre-planned and immediate air requests, and provide terminal control for supporting aircraft. At battalion level, the TACP has 3 Marine aviators, or naval flight officers, and several enlisted radio operators. Decentralized control of direct air support missions is performed by the Direct Air Support Center. The desk coordinates all immediate fixed-wing and helicopter direct air support requests and assigns control of direct support aircraft to TACPs through the TAC-As, or Battalion Fire Support Coordination Centers. The desk is co-located with and works closely with the Senior Fire Support Coordination Center in deconflicting aircraft and other supporting arms. This concludes our discussion of the MAX. Let's now look at the Navy Tactical Air Control System. The Navy Carrier Task Force Commander exercises operational control over the full range of task force activities through a Tactical Flag Command Center. Like other component commanders, he has a staff for advice and assistance. To illustrate how the Navy operates during joint operations, let's assume the Joint Force Commander's campaign plan calls for the Navy Task Force Commander to control a specific sea area. He is to do this by denying the enemy's surface, subsurface, and airborne platforms access to that area. He is also tasked to provide general and direct naval gunfire support to the Army and Marine components. The first priority for the Navy's air effort is to protect the task force's vessels. The task force commander is also the Composite Warfare Commander, or CWC. He has subordinate warfare commanders whose jobs are to coordinate the task force's assets for specific mission areas. In our example, these are the commanders and coordinators. Based on the apportionment guidance, the CWC provides guidance to the Air Resource Element Coordinator, in this case, the Carrier Commander, who is supported by personnel operating from the Combat Information Center, or CIC. He prepares and forwards the Task Force ALAREC. Upon receipt of the sortie allot, the CIC prepares and disseminates the Naval Task Force's ATO, and then monitors its execution and makes adjustments as necessary. On board the carrier, Air Wing personnel plan and prepare for the tasked missions. To maintain control, CICs on each ship are linked to the Tactical Flag Command Center. When mission execution begins, the Carrier Air Traffic Control Center provides vectors to pilots during the departure and recovery phases. Onboard search radars form a surveillance network similar to the Air Force and Marine radar networks. To enhance surface radar coverage, the task force employs E-2 aircraft. With function and capabilities similar to the Air Force AWACS, E-2s help provide an integrated theater air picture by transmitting track data to ships and other components. The Anti-Air Warfare Commander and his staff use this radar information to employ anti-air warfare aircraft and surface-to-air missiles. For amphibious operations, the Navy Tactical Air Control System's surface and airborne control agencies plan, control, and coordinate close air support, offensive air support, anti-air warfare, and assault support operations. The primary air control agency for an amphibious task force is the Tactical Air Control Center. It supervises and coordinates tactical air operations within the amphibious objective area. A tactical air control squadron, manned primarily by air controllers, staffs and supports the Navy TACC. The TACC has 5 main sections with functions somewhat similar to the Air Force AOC and ASOC. The Air Traffic Control Section coordinates and controls all air traffic within and passing through their assigned amphibious operations area. The Helicopter Coordination Section coordinates all helicopter operations. The Anti-Air Warfare Section coordinates and monitors air-to-air and surface-to-air fires for the Commander Amphibious Task Force. A Plans and Support Section provides current and future planning in response to the tactical situation. The Air Support Control Section is manned by naval aviators or naval flight officers. They respond to all immediate direct air support requests. This section is similar to an Air Force ASOC. Naval aviation observers collect intelligence information and request, coordinate, and adjust artillery, naval gunfire, and close air support. In certain instances, the task force has a Tactical Air Direction Center, which is subordinate to the TACC. In these cases, the TADC controls and coordinates tactical air operations for advanced force operation, sector operations, and at times the landing force ashore. It can also assume the function of the TACC ashore. Although not an agency of the Tactical Air Control Center, the Supporting Arms Coordination Center, or SAC, integrates and coordinates all supporting arms. It is the supporting arms coordinator who decides which supporting arm is best suited for the target, and as such is a principal player in the conduct of close air support missions. The SAC compares very closely with the Army's Fire Support Element and Marines' Fire Support Coordination Center. This concludes our review of the systems of the 4 services. Let's look at the liaison required for joint air operations. To comply with joint pubs, components provide representatives who meet to coordinate reconnaissance activities. At these meetings, or by communications, pre-planned air reconnaissance and SIGINT requests, along with overlay plots, are compared and consolidated. This process eliminates duplication of effort and efficiently satisfies collection requirements of the joint force as a whole. Components also provide representatives for the daily Joint Target Coordination Board meeting. At this meeting, J2 and component representatives recommend targets to the J3 for attack. Because our Air Force Component Commander has been designated the JFAC, AADC and ACA, he may require that component liaison personnel be available to coordinate activities at the AOC, Joint Air Defense Center, and Joint Airspace Control Center. In general, the commands establish support relationships determine the amount of liaison provided to other components. To illustrate this, assume the Navy component is providing the Army component with naval gunfire and close air support missions. In this case, air control and fire direction personnel from an air and naval gunfire liaison company are assigned to supported Army units. In our situation, the Joint Force Commander specified a close support relationship between Air Force and Army components. This means that Army air support requests are submitted directly to the Air Force AOC rather than to the Joint Operations Center. With this relationship, both components provide liaison personnel. The Army component provides liaison to the Air Force component in the form of a Battlefield Coordination Element, or BCE. The chief of the BCE works at the Air Force Component Headquarters and represents the Army Component Commander. Other BCE members work in the AOC, Airlift Division, and at fighter, reconnaissance, and airlift air bases. The entire BCE team works to exchange vital information between Army elements and Air Force units engaged in close air support, air interdiction, reconnaissance, electronic combat, and airlift. BCE members in the AOC coordinate air defense, airspace management, and intelligence matters, and process and coordinate air support requests from both corps so that the priorities of the Field Army Commander are followed. As an example, this prioritization may result in a distribution of 60% of the on-call CAS sorties to one corps and 40% to the other. During ATO execution, BCE members may revise this distribution decision based on the Field Army Commander's guidance. BCE liaison personnel coordinate requests for airlift support with the Airlift Division. Ground Liaison Officers, or GLOWs, are BCE members who brief the enemy and friendly ground situation to flight crews and debrief air crews at Air Force fighter, reconnaissance, and airlift walks. In addition to the BCE, the Field Army provides other liaison for specific requirements. For example, at supporting air reconnaissance units, military intelligence detachment personnel interpret, reproduce, and store imagery collected by reconnaissance aircraft. They can arrange to have imagery results delivered to interested Army elements via COMNETs or Army aircraft. The Senior Army Air Defense Headquarters provides liaison personnel to the Air Force CRC or a Marine TAOC. Liaison personnel advise on Army air defense capabilities and ensure that hostile tracks assigned by the CRC or TAOC are engaged by appropriate Army units. To facilitate airspace coordination, the Army has representatives in the Airspace Management Liaison Section at the CRC or TAOC. Additionally, the Army's Flight Operations Center and Air Traffic Control Facility is electronically tied to the CRC or TAOC. The primary Air Force liaison element is the Air Support Operations Center, or ASOC. An ASOC, located at the Army's senior maneuver units, normally each corps, acts as the focal point for information exchange, coordination, and special requests for air support. Supporting the ASOCs with these functions are tactical air control parties, located at each maneuver echelon from corps to battalion. TACPs are like Marine TACPs and perform similar functions. Now let's take a look at the communication systems that tie these command and control structures and liaison elements together, providing the interoperability needed for effective joint operations. Generally, communications are used to exchange voice and record messages from higher to lower units and from supporting to supported units. These networks connect the JOC to component operation centers where the directives, joint target list, and apportionment guidance are received. Likewise, communications networks from components to subordinates are used for sending ATOs and receiving operational status reports. Each component has tactical digital information links, or TADLs. With these links, data and radar pictures may be passed between the E2 and E3 airborne radar platforms and sent down to a surface facility such as a message processing center or a tactical data communication center. These facilities then translate the information and pass it on to surface radar facilities and to Army and Marine missile units. With a TADL network, each component transmits its own radar picture to other components, who can then see the entire theater radar picture, provide warnings, and direct appropriate actions. Liaison elements may use either existing communications or communications provided by their parent organization. For example, the Army provides dedicated secure lines to the AOC so their BCE members can exchange information with other Army elements and receive air support requests. Likewise, each ASOC and DASC have lines to their higher operation centers, radar facilities, and flying units. The TACPs use a dedicated net to pass the supported unit's immediate request for air support to the Corps or Marine Division. This concludes our review of communication and liaison. To illustrate how liaison elements exchange information, let's see how a request for air support is processed and transmitted. First, a request for air support may be submitted in two formats: pre-planned or immediate. Pre-planned requests are submitted far enough in advance to be included in the ATO and permit detailed mission coordination and planning. An immediate request is submitted for a mission which was not anticipated. With this in mind, let's first see how the pre-planned air support requests are processed. For this example, let's use an Army request. The process is essentially the same for both Army and Marine units. Each maneuver battalion prepares fire plans to support its scheme of maneuver. Targets requiring air support are included in the fire support plans. A battalion's fire support plan and associated air support requests are then forwarded to the brigade. The brigade staff consolidates the battalion's fire plans and requests, eliminates any duplication of effort, and then forwards their plan and request to division. There, the process is repeated, and the plans and requests are forwarded to Corps. At Corps, the division's plans and requests are again evaluated, prioritized, and consolidated. The Corps determines and adds on-call requirements to the requests. The air support requests are then forwarded to the BCE. BCE personnel, who represent the Field Army Commander on these matters, identify requirements by priority to AOC combat plans personnel. This prioritization allows combat plans to begin their allocation planning and preparation of the allocation request messages. Any request that is beyond the Air Force's capabilities is listed on their ALAREC message, along with any shortfalls for other air missions. After ALARECs are received from each component, the JFAC matches reported shortfalls to excess sorties that may have been reported by air-capable components. The results of this process are listed on the sortie allotment message for cross-force tasking. Cross-force tasking means that assets from one component are allotted and tasked to fill another component's request. For example, Army requests may be filled by Air Force sorties or by any Navy or Marine sorties that were offered as excess. Once the sortie allot is completed, it is transmitted to the components, who, in compliance with the message, develop and disseminate their ATOs, or make inputs to a single ATO. The ATOs normally include scheduled and on-call missions. Scheduled missions are flown at specific times to specific locations and are controlled by the respective air-capable component's Senior Operations Center. Control of on-call DCA assets is normally decentralized to the respective air-capable component's senior radar facility for commitment to enemy air attacks. Likewise, control of on-call CAS assets is normally decentralized to the ASOC or the desk for commitment to fill Corps-approved immediate requests from subordinates. Let's look at how an immediate close air support mission might be requested, processed, and executed. For this example, let's focus on one Army Corps. Assume that a number of sorties are allocated and tasked for CAS missions. The Field Army Commander, in coordination with the AOC, has distributed some allocated on-call sorties to this Corps, and the AOC has decentralized control for the specified number of on-call CAS missions to the supporting ASOC. With this in mind, let's focus on one forward maneuver battalion as it makes an attack. Initially, the attack was successful, but presently, one company is engaging the enemy with all available organic weapons and supporting fire, but is unable to maneuver due to heavy resistance. The company commander directs the fire support team chief to contact battalion and request additional fire support. He's not concerned about the kind of fire support he'll receive. He is simply asking for help. When the company commander's request is received at battalion, the fire support element evaluates the target and recommends fires as appropriate. Once the fires begin, it is the fire support coordinator's job to orchestrate them. If other members in the fire support element cannot produce the desired results with surface support means, an immediate request for close air support is given to the TACP. Using his high-frequency radio, a TACP member transmits the request to Corps through the ASOC. The request describes the target, its location, desired results, and preferred time on target. The battalion's request is monitored and copied by other TACPs at the brigade and division, and a copy is given to the respective fire support element. FSE members determine if other available fire support means can respond faster and more effectively. Together, they note the locations of friendly units in the target area and the target priority to ensure that an air attack will support the overall scheme of maneuver. Using these and other factors as a basis, they decide if CAS is appropriate. If other fires cannot achieve the desired results, brigade and division approve the battalion's CAS request. If the request is approved, no further transmissions are made by brigade and division over the air request net. In other words, silence for a specified time signifies approval. However, if either the brigade or division had disapproved the battalion's request, they would come up on the air request net within a prescribed time limit, say 10 minutes, and notify the ASOC of the disapproval. The requesting battalion's TACP acknowledges the disapproval. In our example, the request is approved at all echelons. The Corps G3 Air notifies the ASOC that the request is approved. The request now becomes an Air Force requirement for distributed on-call missions under the ASOC's control. While the Army was processing the request, the ASOC began a planning process that will result in fast response to getting bombs on target. They check aircraft availability, target type and location, threats, and available ordnance loads. Weapon specialists recommend the type ordnance to achieve the requester's desired results. The ASOC determines the specific mission requirement to support the request and identifies the aircraft available to fly the mission. An immediate CAS requirement can be filled by either tasking on-call aircraft from air or ground alert or diverting scheduled CAS missions with low priority. Upon receiving Corps approval for the request, the ASOC notifies the appropriate WOC, CRC, TACP, and Corps of their planned actions. In this example, the ASOC scrambles an on-call ground alert mission consisting of 2 aircraft with an alert launch order, or ALORD. As the aircraft climb out, they contact the CRC for flight advisories or radar vectors to the target area. Then, as the aircraft approach the area, the controlling radar hands them off to a tactical air coordinator, in this case, an ABCCC. After the airborne controller hands them off to the FAC for final control, the aircraft ingress to the target area, using terrain masking techniques to avoid detection. Prior to ingress, a member of the TACP advised the fire support coordinator that the aircraft were inbound. At that time, the fire support coordinator performed several critical functions necessary for a successful attack. He directed that surface fires be shifted as necessary, coordinated the suppression of enemy air defenses, and notified attached Army air defense units that friendly aircraft are entering the area. The aircraft attack and expend their ordnance under the final control of the FAC, who is in position to observe the attack. After the attack, the FAC provides the pilots with a bomb damage assessment. The pilots, in turn, make an in-flight report that winds up at the AOC, ASOC, and Corps. Upon returning to the airbase, the pilots debrief the mission with intelligence personnel and the GLOW. From that debriefing, a mission report is prepared and sent to the battalion, Corps, ASOC, and AOC. If more firepower is required on that target, the battalion might submit another immediate CAS request, and the process would be repeated. Let's now review what you've seen during this presentation. Based on lessons learned, our doctrine for employment of air power is based on the principles of centralized control through a single air commander. Each service has its own unique command and control system that can operate independently or can be integrated into a joint force system. With liaison personnel providing the interactions among the services and communications networks linking the components together, a joint system supports unified actions that help achieve land, sea, and air objectives. By working in an integrated system, everyone shares the tactical data generated by each component's radar network, and air support can be requested, coordinated, approved, and flown by air crews from the Air Force, Navy, and Marines in support of requests for both immediate and pre-planned air support. The days of single-service land, sea, or air operations are gone. To fight and win on tomorrow's battlefield, the capabilities of all 4 services must be effectively employed. The employment of air power in support of joint operations will be critical to the outcome of any battle. For air power to be effective, we must have personnel who know and are able to apply joint doctrine. They must know how each service's command and control system is organized and can be integrated into a joint system. They must know how these systems are tied together through a network of liaison elements and communications for total interoperability. This presentation has provided basic information on how a joint system functions. You can get a more complete understanding by attending courses at the United States Air Force Air-Ground Operations School and by reviewing these publications: Joint Pubs 3-56.24, JP 3-52, ICAC2 TTP, applicable service documents, and by participating in joint exercises.